Today, we're going to discuss the ancient secret of telepathy. Devoted to the ancient secrets taught by the Rosicrucians, a group that collected ancient historical teachings from all over the world, tested them and utilized them. The secret knowledge has remained within the Rosicrucian teachings for centuries. They have tested and developed specific techniques to utilize the projection of psychic energy, creating abundance, and a whole variety of other factors. Recently, we discussed the ancient secrets to healing. Each of these we've learned some powerful techniques that people have come back to me and said, when they tried these techniques, it worked. This is grounded in spiritual research over time. One thing that the Rosicrucians are very good at is teaching telepathy. Utilizing specific techniques that can be incorporated, they have a way of breaking down how to be telepathic in the ways that it works. We are all telepathic, I believe, but we all simply don't understand how it works and how to utilize this amazing power. I believe over time, as we enter into this new earth, we will become even more and more aware of our own telepathic power. This comes from a book by Joseph Weed, who was also a Rosicrucian and taught these Rosicrucian techniques called Wisdom of the Mystic Masters, how to understand and use telepathy. It is well to understand something about telepathy, or in years to come it will be increasingly important for you to know if and when you are responding to telepathic suggestions and even consciously to employ telepathy yourself. The very fact that you are interested in this topic is an indication that you have the ability to receive and send mental telepathic messages. There are many kinds of telepathy and mental telepathy is only one of them. Generally speaking, there are three broad classifications of telepathic communication. These are 1. The telepathy which takes place within the individual. Usually this is a form of communication between the higher self and the brain. This is stressed in the Rosicrucian teachings and is described as cosmic contact. 2. Telepathic communication between individuals, which we will study. And 3. Telepathy between groups or between an individual and a group. For you, as an individual, the most important area for you to develop is the interplay between your soul, mind, and brain. If you can establish clear channels of communication among these 3 levels of your consciousness, you will be on the verge of a breakthrough into cosmic awareness or cosmic consciousness. This requires special training, which I will describe. The present chapter concerns itself with telepathic communication between individuals. Much false and misleading information is in circulation about telepathy, and as a result, many mistaken notions and vague ideas exist concerning it. So I will start with fundamentals. 4 types of telepathic communication between individuals are possible. These are 1. Emotional telepathy. The connection is between the solar plexus centers of the individuals involved, is largely to do with feeling. 2. Between mind and mind or mental telepathy. This is what you're to study and learn. 3. Between soul and soul, an advanced study. 4. Between any 2 or 3 of these aspects simultaneously. Emotional or instinctive telepathy. The most common form of telepathic communication is of course that between the solar plexus centers of 2 or more individuals. This is sometimes called instinctive telepathy. It occurs when emotions or feelings are strongly held and corresponding radiations are transmitted from The solar plexus center. When direct physical contact exists or when the auras of two or more individuals blend together, the transmission is effected quite easily. It rarely occurs at a distance, but when it does, under the urge of some powerful emotional stimulus, it is transmitted on the astral level, not the mental. This emotional or instinctive telepathy may occur between the unthinking and undeveloped beings, between humans and animals, and in some cases between animals. In addition to the interplay between average humans, it is not a transmission of thoughts and words but of feelings. Menace, fear, friendliness, harmlessness, or love may all be experienced in this way. Such communication exists between mother and child and is the manner in which the emotional body of the child is created by its parents just as surely as is the physical body. It is found in the theater when the star sways the audience and makes them laugh or cry. In this case, the individuals in the audience also exchange emotional reactions with each other in response to the stimulus provided by the performer. And it is one of the reasons why they are likely to panic if fire or any other danger threatens. It is also this type of telepathy which is found dominating the average spiritualistic séance. The people are urged to sit close together, sometimes with hands or arms touching, to form a circle. This facilitates the free flow of solar plexus energy throughout the group. Their feelings, worries, sorrows and desires become apparent and are introduced as part of this so-called reading. This emotional telepathy was the earliest mode of communication between man and man in antidote speech. Originally, it concerned itself only with self-preservation and self-production and manifested chiefly as a type of inner sensation. Today, it still lingers in a higher form, and you have often heard, "I have a feeling this is going to happen," or "I felt you were going to call." You should make a positive effort to elevate this type of sensitivity to higher stage of feeling. Work toward communication from heart to heart and thus develop a compassionate interest in others. Mental telepathy. The second type of telepathic communication between individuals, that from mind of one to the mind of another, is what we are concerned with here. Let me point out to you at the very outset that the more thoroughly emotion and feeling and strong desire are eliminated, the more accurately and successful will your experiment become. Actually, the strong desire to achieve success in telepathic work or the fear of failure is a sure way to neutralize the very best effort. Any emotion in the receiver tends to create streams of energy which radiate out from him and act as a shield or buffer which prevent the incoming mental energies from making contact in somewhat the same manner. Worry or anxiety on the part of the sender will turn his outgoing thought back on himself like a boomerang. Therefore, the first consideration should be the attainment of the proper attitude. Try to cultivate a spirit of don't care or non-attachment. Emotionally, you should feel that it is not important to you whether the experiment succeeds or not. This is another way of saying that your attention or your consciousness should be focused in the mind and brain. This can best be achieved by a person who has learned to concentrate and direct his thoughts. As described, I must assume you have undertaken these preliminary steps and are prepared to succeed. Today, the capacity for mental telepathy is becoming increasingly evident. Instinctive telepathic work is still the easiest path for most, and this possibility must always be watched for and guarded against. Not that it is wrong or bad, but it makes for confusion. The solar plexus is still exceedingly active in most of us, and therefore the earliest successful attempts will usually be a mixture of emotional and mental telepathy. Frequently, the sender will project a message quite properly through the throat center, but the recipient with an active solar plexus will get it two ways. The results in an emotional interpretation of the message not intended and not in the sender's mind but solely in the aura of the recipient. For example, the sender may project a message, hurry, or make haste, having in mind nothing more than the speeding up of the recipient's efforts to learn the telepathic process. The receiver, however, even though he correctly apprehends the idea of make haste, is likely to surround it with all sorts of dire emotional pictures drawn from his own worry storehouse. He will experience a sense of frustration because he is not proceeding faster. He will fear he is failing because he is not fast enough. He will feel resentment at the circumstances which he believes retard his progress. In short, he will find himself in a complete emotional turmoil because of the implied urgency in the message make haste. Thus, you see how important it is to have developed your powers of concentration to a point where it is possible to hold the attention or consciousness on a mental level and dissolve or drop off all emotional interference. To have fruitful results, the head centers of both sender and receiver must be consciously and deliberately employed. Likewise, both parties must be relaxed and ready. If one party is under an emotional strain, he is very likely not to be properly responsive, although he may have the best intentions, or again if one or the other is occupied with a mental problem of his own. He may be encased in a wall of thought forms which will effectively prevent any message from either getting out or coming in. There are many problems, as you can well realize, and the cultivation of a form of detachment is essential to success. However, let us assume that we are successful in this and proceed to the next step. It has been said that a good telepathic interrelation will grow through the medium of a constant attitude of reflective thought and a steadfast love for each other. Love here does not refer to personal physical love but to its highest counterpart, which recognizes all personality weaknesses and failings but dismisses them as unimportant in relation to the shining light of the true and herself. These two factors of reflective thought and steadfast love cannot be developed overnight. They are not possible between any two given persons. They represent an ultimate and ideal, and we are only at the beginning, but we must make a start, so what is needed is a technique. In planning this technique, we must bear in mind that in telepathy we are dealing with matter and energy in just the same way as when we build a house or construct a railroad. True, we deal with a different type of energy and a much finer grade of matter, but they are still matter and energy and obey the laws of matter and energy. Always remember this, the technique of telepathy. In telepathy we will be dealing with 1. The force of love, 2. The force of mind, and 3. Primal energy in the following matter. 1. The force of love attracts the needed material with which to clothe the idea, thought or concept to be transmitted, thus producing a coherency. You must realize that when you conceive an idea or frame a mental concept, you are actually gathering together and compressing into one place a portion of primal energy. In order to hold that portion together long enough for it to be transmitted to another, you must encase it in a capsule or compress it together in some way. This is where the force of love is needed, for love is a magnetic or attractive force of great power, and it causes the elements in the idea to cohere for a length of time that is in direct ratio to the amount of love force supplied. The force of love is also used by the recipient to attract the thought form or idea or message to himself after it has been released by the sender. This is done by the recipient's concentrating on the sender in a loving way and sending the warmth of his love to the sender. You can see from this how difficult a transmission would become if the slightest dislike or disapproval was permitted to exist between the sender and recipient. This is why such emphasis is placed upon loving and non-critical attitude. 2. The force of mind is necessary to literally light the way for an idea or thought form to be transmitted and received. While the simile of light is nearer to the actual manifestation, it will probably be clear if I liken the mind to the telephone company, which after receiving the number from the sender receives to select the proper lines and connections out of the many million available. The exact lines which will make the connection with the recipient. In fact, light is used. It is a most subtle substance as well as the very obvious one, and the energy of the mind can materialize on a beam of light. In the last year or so, scientists have been experimenting with the idea of modulating laser beams in much the same manner that a radio wave's modulated and sent out by a broadcasting station. Herein is a most important clue to successful mental telepathic communication. A so-called line of sight alignment or tube of light like a laser room is set up between the brains and minds of the sender and recipient. The light from the sender's mind must project like a beam or beacon, and upon this ray the message will travel truly to its intended mark. Of course, the recipient must exert the magnetic power of love to attract attention, reduce an alignment and create atonement. 3. The primal energy inherent in the vital body of the receiver reacts to the energies of love and will as they make their dual impact. This causes the recipient's brain to first become passive and receptive and then gradually awaken to a response activity. The message or idea is then swept into the area of conscious awareness and realized by the recipient. I might point out here that as you advance in this work you will frequently experience a delayed action. If you're close to some person or have been working telepathically with a person, it may send you a message at a time not previously arranged. Involved in work or in some other way at the time, and your attention completely focused on what you're doing. And in such cases the message may be properly received and stored, then released at a later time in your conscious mind when it is at rest. Having in mind the foregoing, the technique to be employed should be as follows. The sender must 1. Send out love to the recipient while visualizing his face or name to focus his full attention on the mental level and quiet all motions. 3. Visualize the message or idea. 4. Then send it forth on a stream of love to the recipient. 5. Dismiss all thought of the process from his mind with the feeling that the communication has been successfully transmitted. The recipient should 1. Send out a stream of love to the sender. This can be visualized as if he were reaching out his hand to touch him and at the same time feeling the warmth of love for him. 2. By use of the will lift his consciousness to the mental level and hold it there free from all emotional stress. 3. Relax and assume an attitude of indifference, not eagerness. This release the psychic energy in his body to be impressed and molded by the incoming thought form. There you have it. That is the technique. The whole technique, it seems simple. It is simple. The only difficult part is in the training of mind, the motions in the body to play the right part at the right time. This is like learning to paint or play the piano. Control is involved in this, takes practice and work. In the beginning it will be best if the sender and recipient are in the same room or in adjoining rooms. Then the sender can notify the receiver when he is starting to send by giving a signal such as a tap of a pencil or the sounding of a bell, and can give some corresponding signal when he finishes to start a simple visualization. But the sender picture in his mind a clear-cut geometric figure such as a circle, triangle, a square or a star. Tell the recipient in advance it will be a geometric figure in order to facilitate the opening of the channel. Obviously this type of advanced warning has no place in true telepathic transmission, but in the beginning it is important to facilitate matters in order to establish confidence. The sender should be able to get a good clear visualization in about 30 seconds. He should try to hold it for about another 30 seconds, not more, than release it and put it out of his mind. Sometimes it helps to draw these symbols on pieces of paper, one symbol to one sheet, and then hold one sheet only before the eye of the sender to help him see it clearly in his mind's eye. In fact, it is a good idea for the sender not to see any of the other symbols for at least 5 minutes before he starts to send. The mind is not instrument when it is not completely understood, and it is quite possible for the sender to be looking at one symbol and be thinking of another. If he is not careful, As pointed out earlier, do not try hard to do this. A relaxed and I don't care attitude is best. Never work it for more than 30 minutes at first. And only extend that time. When you are achieving obvious success, then you can start sending a more complex message. At first, try actual pictures. Have the sender look at a picture in a magazine, an advertisement for example, and after it has been projected, ask the receiver to A. Describe the picture, or B. Tell what colors were in it, or C. what objects could be discerned. As you realize, this is a quite sophisticated transmission and requires both skill and a good degree of atonement. Try words and sentences also and proceed to make this more complicated. As you find that the simple words are easily registered. After you have achieved a degree of success working with the companion in the same room, try sending and receiving at a distance. Select a person in another part of the city, or better still in another city, and decide on a specific day and time for the experiment. Do not spend more than 10 minutes sending or trying to receive. Then stop and check for results. This can be done by telephone or mail. Keep working with this until you succeed. It is no more difficult than working with someone in the same room. But you may find it so because of your imagination. In the medium you are using, distance is not a factor, but in the physical it is. Since all of your conscious acts are limited by time and distance, it is easy to fall into the trap of believing that your mental transmission and reception will be so impeded. Once you overcome this idea, you will find it just as quick and easy as transmission in the same room. A demonstration of telepathy picture transmission. The Rosicrucian lodges in various cities have classes in telepathy about once a month. The students usually are beginners who are being trained in the proper technique of reception. An advanced member skilled in sending images will preside over the class and conduct the instruction. He does not attempt to one-to-one relationship as described earlier, but radiates the image in all directions, not unlike the broadcasting from a television station. A great variety of exercises are given which make it possible to emphasize different aspects of reception. Let me describe one of these sessions. The sender, in this case a woman, a practicing psychologist, presided over the class and acted as a sender. She stood on a platform which was raised about a foot above floor level, and the students, about 60 of them, sat in chairs facing her. Before her was a lectern, and on it, seen only by herself, was a picture in full color, now advertisements which she had clipped from a current magazine. Mountains, sharp cascades of rock dominated the picture, with green trees, partway up their slopes, and a blue lake at their feet. When all the students were comfortably seated, the teacher opened the class. She began with a short lecture on the principle and laws involved, explaining she could gaze intently at a picture and register each detail of that picture in her mind. Then she would energize with love the reflection of the picture in her consciousness, and by the power of her will radiate it outward. She said, "I will concentrate on this picture for 3 minutes until I am sure I have included all its details in the image I'm about to create. Then for the next 3 minutes I will send the picture to you, to all of you, in order to put you in a receptive mood and raise your vibrations from the nagging physical and emotional turbulence which you have brought along with you for your busy day. We will first intone the vowel sound, 3 times on the note of D natural above the middle C. Now sit comfortably and relax when the intonation is completed. I will proceed immediately to the experiment." The note of D was struck on the piano, and all present sang out the own and full voice. To a person not acquainted with the procedure, it probably sounded like a mixed group of poorly trained voices at choir practice, but the effect was different. As the last lingering sound of the third intonation died away, a quiet and peace settled over the group and a slight charging of the atmosphere in the room became noticeable, and this electric silence the experiment started. For 6 minutes all was still. No one coughed. No one moved. Each student was relaxed but intensely aware. Finally the sender looked up, smiled and said, "Who got anything?" Immediately, hands went up all over the room. The newest and least experienced were the first as usual. One said, "I saw mountains," and when the instructor smiled and nodded assent he was encouraged and added, "Blue mountains." "No, they're not blue," he was told, "but there is blue in the picture." "I know," said another. "There is blue sky beyond the mountains and the water in the foreground reflects the blue as well." "Good," said the teacher. "That is a very clear pickup. Now someone else." And so when all around the room, some adding details correctly, some mentioning items that were not in the picture. An example of how errors creeping came when one young man said, "I saw a frosted glass full of reddish-brown liquid with the name Coca-Cola across it." The teacher said, "No, that is not in the picture," but almost simultaneously a young man nearby. Another student said, "Oh, I guess that is my fault. My mind was wandering and being thirsty. I thought how good a long cool drink would be. I guess I must have accompanied the wish with a picture of what I had in mind." "Obviously you did," to the instructor dryly. Anyone else before long, not more than 15 minutes, the entire picture was described in all its details. As far as could be observed, no one student saw the picture in entirety, but the group together certainly did. The colors, the green of the trees, the slate gray of the rocks, the two peaks shutting skyward, the blue, the sky above and the lake below, were seen by many, the tiny configurations and minute details by about a few. This was a typical training session. Not an unusual or difficult performance, but one designed to instruct the new students and most of all to give them the confidence that they too can actually receive the mental impressions from another. There is no doubt that at first this can be done more easily and more successfully in such a group of like-minded students working under the direction of a skilled instructor, but it may also be done by you working with one other person or with a small group. Do not attempt more than 3 or 4 at first. Everyone has his own ideas and his own emotional problems, and where there are too many untrained minds present, no satisfactory results can be expected. Verbal telepathic communication foregoing experiment involved the transmission of a picture. No ideas or messages were included. Sending a picture simpler and easier than trying to transmit a message. Picture is a direct visual experience. There is no mistake in what you see, and this makes possible certain purity of sending, which is more difficult to attain when you try to transmit a message. A message involves words, and words in themselves are symbols. A double process is therefore required at each end. The idea or thought must be couched in words which accurately express it in the mind of the sender. The word or words are then sent, and when received they must be decoded by the receiver and translated back into ideas or thoughts. Even when this has been done, there is no guarantee that your interpretation of the word received is the one which the sender intended to endow it when it was sent to you. It is true this hazard also exists in oral speech, but to a lesser degree. A sync word is seldom spoken. Usually there is a rush of language with each word supported by the ones that preceded it and those that follow, and all are enhanced by intonation and the magic of the speaker's personality. Because of this more involved technique and verbal telepathy, and the increased possibility of error, the training is much more rigorous. You must begin with single words, not before you have acquired assurance in sending one word at a time. Then you contemplate sending sentences, much less complete ideas. Patanjali, the great Hindu sage and teacher, recommends the following technique. 1. Study the form. The word, study it symbolically as a word picture. 2. Study it from the angle of quality, of beauty, of desire. 3. Study its underlying purpose and teaching value as well as its mental appeal for study, its very being an attempt to identify yourself with its divine underlying idea. As you can see, the process gradually lifts your consideration of the word to ever higher levels in your consciousness. When you achieve the highest possible, then send out the word to the receiver, who in turn should endeavor to maintain his attention on the highest mental level of which he is capable, and sending it is frequently helpful if the sender will actually articulate the word softly and clearly as he releases it from his consciousness. The art of communicating with one another has come a long way. It started with the sense of touch. A million, maybe 2 million years ago. Next step was sound, not words but cries of joy, of pain, the gargles of ecstasy, groans of anguish. Next came symbols, gestures of the arms and body, indications of the head. The sign language of the American Indian is a sophisticated outgrowth of this earlier method of communication by signs, which had to dated speech. Hundreds of thousands of years elapsed between the first groping efforts to communicate by touch and the articulation of words. Words then grew into sentences, and sentences into language. Eventually writing developed, first as a representation of the gestures of sign communication, then as pictures of events. Finally, these earlier pictures became conventionalized into letters and words. The various arts marked man's next step upward in his efforts to convey his thoughts and impressions to others. Sculpture, crude at first, then becoming more stylized, followed by music and then by painting. In poetry, this is where the world stands today, the higher means of communication still to be mastered are telepathy, which we study here, inspiration and eventually illumination. Yes, these are the last forms of communication, as you will realize if you consider them for a moment. True, they are not the man-to-man communication of telepathy, but refer to a man's ability to make contact with and draw upon realms of knowledge beyond our most fantastic imagining. Illumination comes only as a result of tremendous control and vast development. This is well beyond the average individual. But everyone above a certain mental level does experience flashes of inspiration. This latent ability can be developed, and I will give you some suggestions to recapitulate. Let me say that successful mental telepathy depends upon the following. 1. The channel between the sender and receiver must be kept open. Any criticism spoken or implied, any suspicion or resentment of one for the other, any impatience or irritation on the part of either will break the contact. 2. The sender must concentrate on sending. There will be many temptations to let his mind wander, even to think over much of the receiver or the technique being employed. The receiver should be designated in an early visualization, then put out of the mind, while the entire effort is to visualize with clarity and then release with love the message to be sent. 3. For his part, the receiver should think of the sender for just a moment or two, and then after sending him a wave of love attraction with the personality out of the mind. From that point onward, the receiver must be truly detached. If maximum success is to be achieved, you must maintain what can best be described as a don't care attitude. Any anxiety about failure or a strong desire for success will be self-defeating, or possibly the greatest difficulty the receiver will encounter as the quieting of his own thoughts. As long as they are active, the energy that will generate will radiate and create a magnetic wall which will block out any incoming thought energy. The receiver must learn how to relax his mind, must indeed practice this beforehand and become proficient in order to ensure success. You are ready to learn telepathy. You probably had many experiences with telepathic contacts, some of which you recognized, some not. This is a faculty inherent in all humans and requires only attention and practice for its development. The human race needs to relearn telepathy, and within 500 years it will again become an accepted mode of communication for a very large segment of humanity. You are ready for it now and can learn it through conscientious effort and hard practice. If you set yourself to do this and are successful, you will benefit yourself in many ways. What is even More important, you will be contributing to the advancement of the entire human race. I urge you to be a pioneer. The rewards are very great. This very enlightening discussion of telepathy highlights something very important for me. As I read this, I realized that in our current situation most people are not going to be able to do this. Most people are distracted. They're incapable of quieting their minds. They're overly emotional and incapable of quieting their emotions. It's important from this material to understand there is a distinction in telepathy, and that you can feel people's feelings and send them. That's communicating. At the solar plexus level, if you want to send images and words, it becomes much more complex. It's important also to note that it's not like a telephone call. You can send a message to someone. They might be working, they might be mowing the lawn, and then when they're done with whatever task they have, the message can be released. There are different levels of telepathy here, and it's emphasized that there's a telepathic connection going on between the brain and the soul and the higher mind. When we communicate with the higher self, there's a telepathic connection that is involved in that. I do believe that understanding and going through this process of telepathy is incredibly important, and by training yourself and applying yourself to basic techniques, for instance the exercise and sending the triangle or the circle or anything like that, you start to work your mind like a muscle and you get better and better at it. We should openly accept the idea that we can send messages, and oftentimes I would say that if you have certain emotions come up, it may not be your own. You might walk into a Walmart and just get exposed to certain people's emotions. Your solar plexus is sort of active when you're in group settings. And you must understand that there's a differentiation that goes on as you become more alert and aware. You're able to quiet your mind down and observe what's going on in your mind and your emotions. You may be able to get to a level where you can interpret whether or not a message has been sent and whether or not it was just your own thoughts that are happening. I believe a lot of times we're thinking thoughts that are really telepathic messages. Get some crazy thought in your mind, and you're like, why would I be thinking that? And you've just gone into the sea of thoughts that are all around you. Understand, we are essentially walking around in an ocean of thoughts. They're constantly bombarding us. If you're depressed or having suicidal thoughts that may not be your own thoughts, you may be exposed to thoughts that are not originating in your own mind. It's an ongoing process to understand the way the mind works, but it's important to understand that you're an open receiver and transmitter. This is an important observation to come to grips with, because a lot of times people identify all their thoughts as if it's a part of their own identity. In general, who they are really your receiving station, and sometimes those thoughts that are flowing through you are no different than just hearing the echoes of a radio that's being played in next door to you that has nothing to do with you. You didn't even tune into it. As you quiet your mind down and become more observant and focused, then you will become more aware of the thoughts that interplay within your mind. It's important here, remember the technique in which they received thoughts involved just saying the Om 3 times. If you want to receive or send thoughts, you relax yourself, you send the Om, clear your mind, and you connect to love. It's another thing that's emphasized in this is that love is the key element in transmitting a thought or idea. If you need any other topic and idea concept, so please comment me and like, share and subscribe my channel for other video. Thanks from Relax Audiobooks.